Hello everyone, this is Code Ode. Welcome to my tutorial. In this tutorial, I want to show you how to write a two-way data binding in plain JavaScript, so no framework. Here is my index.html file. I have a index.css, so my CSS file right here. It's linked in this index.html. Then we have our script, our JavaScript file, and we have some HTML right here with our input tag. This is the CSS file, nothing too fancy. And this is our index.js. We can actually close this index.css. What is two-way data binding? This is for those who don't know. Well, it refers to sharing data between our template, the HTML, the input fields, and our JavaScript code in such a way that if you change the data in one place, it will automatically reflect at the other end. So if you update the value of an input field, then it will automatically update the JavaScript code that deals with that value. And if we update if we do it the other way around, if we update that value in our JavaScript code, then it will automatically update the value of our input field. So we first start with the basics. We need a function, an utility function, to query the DOM. So we name it with the underscore, and we say we need a query, and then we simply return document query selector, and we pass the query. We create an empty object. Let's call this object model, and then we can define a property on this object using object and then dot define property. This is another way to define a property in an object. It gives us much more control on how to get and set the value of this property. So it needs three arguments: the object on which we want to define this property, the property name, let's say name, and the third argument, an object that it is either a descriptor or an accessor. You can read much more about this method on Google. So we need a descriptor object because we want to describe how to get and set the value of this property. We need to write two methods, get, and we need a set method with the new value. So whenever we write something like model name to get the value of this property, this method is going to be called, and whenever we assign a new value to this property, this method gets called. So what we want is to, for the get method, we want to basically query for that input field. So my idea is to use a data attribute and say data model name. This is the name of our property, name, and then we write here a pair of square brackets, and then we write data model, and we say name, and we say value, and of course we want to return this value. If we save and go back to the browser, refresh, and say test3, and if we go in our console and say model and we say model name, you can actually see that it shows test3. Perfect. And now we have to write the code for our set method. This is pretty simple. We have to copy this from here just to save some time. We say this, and we assign the value of the new value. And right now, if I go right here and say model name is equal with let's say test4, we save, you can see that it shows test4. And if we go in our console and we write model name and we assign the value of test5 and hit enter, you can see that it shows test5. Perfect. Now what if we want to show this model data, this the value of this property name in our template in a different HTML tag? say we have a div right here. My idea is to use that attribute with the name view, and then we pass the model name. In our case it is name. So every time we want to show the value of a model, we have to use this data view. This is my idea. You can use something else. Now we can display this this value of the name property. We have to do exactly the same. Get that element, so we can actually write a pair of square brackets, data view, and then we have name, and we say inner text, and we pass the value of the model name. We save, and we can see that it actually shows test4. But if we update the value here, you can see that there is no update in that div. The text does not update, and this is because we do not track for whenever we press a key or release that key to update the model data. So we do not really have a two-way data binding, but we can fix this. We have to write right here, say we have to use this just to save some time. So we need to get that input on key up, so we listen for that event, and we simply we take this code from here and put it here, but we have to keep it there for test4 for this value to actually be saved as inner text, as the text of this div. And this is exactly all we have to do. We save, and perfect. And if we update here, you can see that the update gets reflected in that div. The text changes. Now, to make things a little bit more cleaner, we can actually create a function right here. Function bind data. We need a model and the property name. In fact, let's call this object and property name. And what we have to do is to take this code from here and move it here. And every time we set a new value, we want to update the view, so we have to get this from here and move it right here. But we have to change this with object, and we have to change right here object. And of course, right now the property name is this parameter, so we have to update it everywhere. So we say property name, have to do the same update right here. Property name, let's copy this from here and update everywhere. Here we have our view, so make sure we write view. We have to do the same here, and of course here, but we have to write view. Perfect. We save, but we have to call this function bind data, and we pass the model and the property name. In our case is name. Save, go back to the browser, and everything is working just fine. If we update the value here, the value gets updated in our div. The text, you can see, changes automatically. But still, I'm still not satisfied with this code. I want things to be even cleaner. My idea is to have something like this. Let's say const model like this, and I want to define the property. My property is like here. Let's say name. Let's give it a default value of test1, something like this. This is all I want, and then I want a function something like bind data. Let's say bind data 2, and all I want to do is to pass the model. This is all I want. So of course, let's do it. But to add these comments right here, and to comment this too. Perfect. Right now we have to create this new function bind data to. We need the object. Now I want first thing to do is to create a copy of this object, because eventually after this thing I want to, after we copy this the enumerable properties of this object into a new object, I want to remove every single property from our object, basically from our model, so that we can define these properties using the define property method. So to copy an object, we say const, we name it as copy object, and we say object assign, and then the target object, an empty object, and then the source from where we want to copy all the enumerable properties. So we say object. Perfect. And now to delete every single property from our object, we say we have to use a for in loop for const key in object, and we write delete object, and then we pass the key. Now that we have our copy object, we need once again a new for in loop, const, this time property name. We just change the name of that key in copy object, and we have to get all this code from here, because we want to use it for every single property that we want to define. Perfect. Let's see if that everything is fine. It is the way we want it to be. So we have this, but we also want to assign, if we have a default value in our copy object, in our model, we have to assign this value when we call this function. So right here we can actually say object property name, and we can say copy object property name, which also updates the view. And let's see if this is actually working. Perfect. If we update a value here, the value gets updated there. Well, that's it with this tutorial. Well, you have to notice one thing. This is very dependent on the view. If you don't have a view, this is actually going to show many errors. So it's easy to check if you have to use an if to check if this view is there or not. And the other thing is that you can use this is actually for you can see for an input type of text, but you can use it for a select, for a checkbox, or whatever you want to use. You can check the type of the element, and listen for the appropriate key events.